What's up, everybody? It's Kevin and Sergey once again welcoming you back to the channel for another episode in our Antares lore series.
This episode, we're going to be talking about the Boromites, the craggy rockmen of the Antares universe.
That's right, we're going to be talking about the Boromite, one of the more unique pan-human morphs that exist on the worlds of both Imtel civilizations, as well as the Determinate, and even within alien civilizations. But always in small numbers. They never really exist in large groups.
In many ways, the Boromites are a nomadic species. They don't really control any planets of their own. Instead, they prefer to kind of set up shop in the societies of other cultures, making insular communities within that greater structure. They fiercely value their independence, so they don't really assimilate to any of the cultures that they live within. They tend to prefer to be prospectors, miners, treasure hunters, space explorers, all of the things that don't really allow them to set up deep roots.
The origin of the Boromites as a people harkens all the way back to very early history during the first age of Antaran space. During the time of old Earth's expansion, like first expansions into Antaran space, they were able to colonize a kind of unique system known as Borom. And this system was unique because it lacked planets, but what it did have was thousands upon thousands of mineral-rich asteroids. And these asteroids were so chock full of building materials that they were able to actually refine those and use the material to build whole worlds. The biggest challenge the humans possessed in this system, however, was the fact that it was incredibly dangerous to work in the conditions. There was no gravity, there was no atmosphere, and the workers would be exposed to intense levels of radiation, an environment that no normal human was able to survive for long.
The actual origins of the Boromite morph are somewhat shrouded in mystery, but it seems that they're the result of really extreme genetic modification. Modification to the point that would be considered morally dubious in the 7th Age, and probably even at the time. The results of this genetic augmentation is that the Boromites are very, very large, they have very thick bones, and they're covered in this kind of craggy horn-like hide that works almost like a pressure suit, so it makes them very, very tough and able to withstand really thin atmospheres. Additionally, their muscles are very dense, so they're a lot stronger than a normal human, and they're capable of withstanding low gravity in a way that would make like a normal human sick, or maybe even like,
Kill them.
Yeah, kill them. Exactly. On top of that, they also regenerate in a somewhat lizard-like fashion. It doesn't go into details, but I feel like if, they're like in a bar hitting their fingers with a knife, if they lop one off, I'm pretty sure it's coming back.
That's awesome. All in all, these physical attributes really come together to make a perfect laborer in the Boromites. And their creators took it a step further because not only physically, but also mentally, the Boromites have been engineered to fill this role. Boromites, as almost like a culture, really do enjoy and relish being in dangerous, hard labor conditions for whatever reason. Capitalists would just love the Boromites. But they really do. And as a culture, they actually detest people being lazy and idleness and really become languished when they have, no quotas to fill or tasks to complete. And it's just these things really mold the Boromites into being a laboring force as a culture even. The Boromites are not only good at physical labor though, they can handle more high-minded tasks because they actually are quite proficient as construction workers, engineers, and builders in general that are known for building incredibly functional and practical structures, vehicles, and anything else.
Boromite society is not unified in the same way that the Panhuman Concord is. It's actually rather fractured into smaller subsets called guilds. These guilds can sometimes work together, but are also fairly likely to see each other as rivals as well. Each guild at its heart has a Boromite clan that it consists of many related families. These family units tend to be very large because Boromites breed at an extremely rapid rate, with twins and triplets even being the norm for a birth.
It even talks about like 5 and 6, so they're like having like Boromite litters.
Yeah, literally, yeah.
These large Boromite families are very matriarchal in their structure. The highest point of authority in the entire clan and guild is known as the matriarch and is awarded to the eldest and, I'm assuming, wisest of the mothers. The matriarch's eldest female descendants also receive the title of Guildess, and they also hold a kind of important role in society.
Although it is a matriarchal society, there are political positions available for men, the most notable of which is the Rockfather, which is essentially something like a general. They take over in times of war from the matriarch. However, this is somewhat of a figureheady position, as it is noted that they don't really ever deviate from the matriarch's chosen path. And if they do, it's a very controversial decision. So controversial, in fact, that whole groups of menfolk have been exiled from Boromite society just for disagreeing with the matriarch. And it makes a note that when they're exiled, they kind of like lose their moral compass to a certain extent and become like true Boromite outlaws.
All the Boromite gang fighters are tattletaling on the Rockfathers because they're not going with Mom's plan.
Boromite society functions because pretty much their entire modus operandi is to work collectively towards garnering wealth for the clan. And they take somewhat of a mercenary, kind of cavalier approach to this. They'll take pretty much whatever job they're given, providing the money is right.
This means you can find the Boromites working on any of the planets in either Imtel society, somewhere within the Determinate amongst the Algren, or even on some uncharted planet, digging through the ruins, searching for some kind of treasure for a freeborn nobleman. Now, as far as the technology utilized by the Boromites, it's actually another one of their weird personality quirks, but the Boromites are incredibly superstitious about anything tech-wise that they utilize that has not been built by their own craggy hands. It is not uncommon to see a Boromite cast aside a more complicated piece of machinery in lieu of something that is just simpler and that they made. And a lot of that has to do with another weird quirk of the Boromites, in which they cannot meld with normal nanospore technology. For whatever reason, their physicality does not integrate into anything like that. So they are actually immune to the Imtel, but also, unfortunately, unable to kind of interact with the technology like a normal panhuman.
This inability to fully integrate with an Imtel system makes the Boromites uniquely positioned to actually set up shop within Imtel societies in a relatively safe manner. Now, they can't do this forever because eventually the Imtel will start taking control of their technology, but it won't take control of the Boromites, and this is partially because the Boromites take a very firm stance on being the controllers of machines rather than allowing machines to control them, as with the Concord and Isaurians.
And that's a really neat fact, because it's like the Algren are kind of mentioned as like tiptoeing through the tulips as far as nanospore technology, so they kind of utilize it, and it's really sweet that the Boromites just like utilize it as little as humanly possible. Taking a step away from the Boromites' kind of like industrial nature, they do participate in conflicts, just like all factions in Tarn space, but they are unique in the sense that they are the only faction in Antares that doesn't really have like an official military. The Boromites are more or less just kind of ready to fight at a moment's notice. If their matriarch decides that her people need to take up arms and defend themselves, or maybe even attack in an opportunistic way, the Boromites will literally fight with whatever they have on hand. You know, charges that were normally used for demolition or mining all of a sudden become great tools against vehicles. Their mass compactors and different tools they use to dig through flesh just as easily. So you just never want to mess with the Boromites, because they're basically so hardy that they're a dangerous foe, even with things like Home Depot weapons, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's kind of like a whole society of Minutemen. Now, just like the Freeborn, who also utilize kind of a Minutemen army, they have certain individuals that are specifically militaristic. Although they're not really like a military, they're more of a bodyguard security type force. But they're really, really cool because they like drill reflex plates directly into their bodies, which is super, super neat, and also looks really cool in the battlefield because they're just kind of like bare-chested and rippling muscles with like stuff drilled into them.
They're like, I'm not putting a shirt on.
Yeah, they're like 80s action heroes, all of them.
Absolutely.
And these Boramites are specifically for fighting. They use mag weapons. Some of them use plasma technology, but mag technology tends to be more preferred.
Now, aside from like the Boramites themselves, though, there is another aspect of their society that is often seen on the battlefield, which is one of me and Sergey's favorite things in Antares, and that is the silicon-based, like crystalline spider species known as the Lavon.
The Lavon are the coolest thing about Antares, at least in my opinion. I think the Lavon are awesome.
I love them.
They're so cool. They're incredible models. Whoever sculpted them, very good job. And these are a silicon-based species that the Boramites have kind of formed a symbiotic relationship to because they are native to Borom.
This species originating from Borom means that the Boramites have literally cultivated a relationship and like breeding program with these creatures for like thousands, like what, more than 10,000 years.
Boramites are from the first age, so
they are basically hand in hand with the Boramites as a species.
Mm-hmm. And they utilize these creatures in a variety of different ways. When they're not in combat, they utilize their like lava spitting ability to mine deeper caves and mine certain minerals. And in battle, obviously, lava spit has advantages. If you throw up a whole bunch of molten rock on somebody, they're gonna have a bad day.
A moment of silence for all of my troops over the course of many battle reports featuring the Lavamites.
Yeah, I feel like the Lavamites have netted me more kills on the field than literally any other unit.
Absolutely. They're so brutal. They're insane. I mean, like, you can't beat a creature that's basically as hard as rocks, whose belly is full of molten heart material that it can expel forward, and then they make them like agile as all get out to boot. So it's like, that'd be terrifying.
They're like horrible space demons. Yeah.
Yeah, like I can't believe the humans survived Borom in general. They just show up and they're like, oh, this is horrible. Let's live here.
Lavamites are kind of like almost insectoid because they have a queen that is an extremely large, like 2-story building, kind of large sized creature that the Boramites ride into battle with heavy weapons on their back. But they kind of go down the line. They also have a Locomite, which is kind of a horse-sized Lavamite. Then they have the regular Lavamite, which is roughly the size of a dog that's goaded into battle with like a bunch of different implants in its brain. And they go all the way down to like tiny little hatchlings, which they drive forward in swarms to snap at the ankles of their enemies.
All this said, I would absolutely not around and find out with the Boramites because that would be the most terrifying thing to be like, you know what I mean? Like someone shows up and is like, hey John, you get the Boramites that contract? Yeah, they refused. So I said, screw you. And he's like, you said what? And then all of a sudden this like Lavamite blasts through a sheet metal door. And it's just like, anyways.
Now, all of this being said, the Boramites are obviously terrifying on the battlefield, but they are grotesquely outnumbered by the other species because they're not unified and they're usually just in these tiny clumps. So most of the time in a nomadic fashion, if they're threatened, they're just gonna flee because they don't really have any reason to stay where they are. They don't have any roots down, they don't have any attachment to a planet, so they'll just kind of mosey on down the line.
This nomadic lifestyle that Sergey just mentioned is what the wider universe understands about the Boramites as a species. And it's because it is very commonplace. I mean, even when a guild reaches a certain size, sometimes the matriarch of that guild, maybe on her deathbed or something, decides to actually break the guild up into separate guilds that are led by different guildesses. And this means that some guilds are actually related to each other, and even though they do exist few and far between, they will utilize individuals like the Freeborn, for instance, to maintain communication between family clans, or related clans, rather.
This relationship with the Freeborn is very much a solidified thing in Boromite society. They have a lot of interaction with the Freeborn, and this is even represented in-game, like when you play a Privateer force. It's mostly Boromites and Freeborn because they have a lot of societal interaction. And this is because the Freeborn are essentially a never-ending font of work for the Boromites. They're always going to have a new job. They're always going to have a weird derelict spaceship that they need to explore to look for loot, and the Boromites are happy to accept their money to do so.
This association with the two factions is sometimes seen as a bad thing, though, because the Freeborn helping the Boromites to stay connected means that there are these like networks of Boromite families that are constructed, and the Boromites, being the superstitious and reclusive people that they are, do tend to kind of supersede normal avenues of communication, trade, and whatnot in favor of going through their families. And this gives them a very similar structure to, I guess, normal or kind of like old-timey crime families. And unfortunately, sometimes they really live this role truer in the sense of kind of becoming these like, networks of dubiously moral guildesses and matriarchs that
they become pirates.
Yeah. I'm not
Sometimes
gonna tiptoe around.
They're a little piratey.
Yeah, they're just terrible, and they will definitely take advantage of weaker races or civilizations that they come across.
If you want an illicit intoxicant, an endangered species, or maybe just a looted artifact of cultural value to another culture, they look no further than the Boramites.
And that concludes the basic information found in the main rulebook about the Boromite faction. And just like all the other ones, man, even though I've read this years ago, it is so fun to come back and look at this information because it really does remind you there's like little things about each race, which is just so cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like we've been playing Antares forever, so you forget all the little details about the factions, and like you get all wrapped up in your own headcanon, and then like all of my Boramites are piratey in my world, and I'm like, oh, where did that come from? And I'm like, oh yeah, because I read this little tiny quib in this book like 3 years ago. It's fun.
Yep. No, and I love the coolest thing I think is like I completely forgot about their like prolific their
litters
birthing rate. Yeah. So it's like I forgot all about that, and I already knew about the matriarch and everything, but it is still just I cannot stop laughing in my head about the fact that it's like the Boramites are totally mama boys. Like I can totally see it. It's like on some kind of like frontier system. There's like a tattoo artist, and it's like the guy's like, your next client's a Boromite, and he's like,
all right, let me get out the mom flesh
exactly.
tattoos.
He's like, you want mom with a heart and an arrow through it? And he's just like, how do you know? He's like, just sit down in the chair, and he dips a jackhammer in ink. This is like, it'd be so funny. And with that, I feel like we've reached the lunatic zone.
Incredibly canon note there.
I love it. But yeah, let us know what you think about the Boramites in the comments below, and ask any questions that you might have for us there too. And while you're there, if you liked this lore video, absolutely like the video and help us fight our battle against the algorithm of our own. And if you've not subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. We'd love to have you.
If you want to support this channel even further, there is a link to Spring in the description below where you can purchase TTW swag.
But if you want to support our channel in the best way pan-humanly possible, you should absolutely consider joining our Patreon community. It is the best way to support us, and we appreciate the pledges of our patrons oh so much.
Well, we only have one major faction left, and until then, we will see you on the tabletop.